Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Just absolutely full of terrifying experiences. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's night-ending bonus, shall we? Today's first experience. Our experience happened because of right place and right time. Even our tree stands were set in place. This allowed us to get in quietly. It was only 2 or 3 minutes as I was ranging from different objects when I saw him sitting with his back against a tree in the last moments of the ray of sun before it had set. My overexcitement as I whispered loudly to my daughter, all the while not taking my eyes off of him. My youngest daughter was in the same tree as I was, facing north, and I was facing east. So when I got her attention, he immediately looked at us, then stood up. He never used his hands to help himself get up. Rather, he effortlessly stood and stepped behind the tree he had been sitting against. We could then see his hands on either side, and he kept peeking around the tree. He had at least one eye on us the entire time, and on several occasions he poked his entire head around. He was slow but deliberate. While I was keeping my eye on him and my daughter had my rangefinder, I was feeling behind me to get my phone out of my pack. Although it seemed like an eternity, it was probably less than a minute before he walked straight away, keeping the tree he was behind between us. We could hear him going down the hill, then it went quiet. In all my years, people on occasion would ask me what I thought about them or if I thought Bigfoot exist. My response was, there's a lot of country that nobody ever gets into, even hunters. Most get a few hundred yards away from their vehicles or road hunt. Even if they get deep into the back country, there are millions upon millions of acres of big canyons, trees sometimes so thick for miles it's hard to get through. I've known elk to be on one side of the hill, and after glassing for hours, do you finally see him. Some herds are 40 to 100 plus elk, and they just disappear and blend in. Now you take a small group of 3 to 6 or so individuals that come out in low light or dark to feed, travel, water, and the odds of seeing one goes down dramatically. A black bear has a range of 10 to 26 miles. A mountain lion ranges 25 to 800 square miles. The toms range the most, 800 plus square miles of the canyon's thick brush, off the beaten path where few or nobody goes. The odds of seeing one, remember, you have to be looking in the dark, is slim to none. Will I or my kids ever encounter another? Most likely not. I think their range is at least as big or bigger than a mountain lion because you have 4 to 6 or so mouths to feed. If it's like a tom mountain lion, that's 29 times 29 equals 841 square miles. If they need double that, it's 40 times 40, 600 square miles. If they are on constant move, following good food source as they move a mile or so each night, and they can go zigzagging through the thickest and most remote country in the dark. If you had that group that was next to your territory on opposite side, the two groups could be 80 miles apart. That's a huge amount of territory. Even if you cut that in half to the size of a tom mountain lion, that's still a huge area. Then it's almost impossible for an average person to see. Sasquatch. I can tell you we saw more than one the following day. We saw a younger looking female with an infant no more than 800 yards from the night before. Were beautiful, fit, and moved effortlessly as they walked. The hair was clean like a bear. The hair was reddish brown, 4 to 6 inches, the female, and the young were jet black, 4 to 6 inches long, thick, but not thick like a bear, as you could see the skin through the hair, and there were parts that were rubbed from probably walking. On the other hand, because we know so little about them, it's now constantly on my mind. I can't sleep at night out in the mountains anymore. I just lie there and listen. My kids, they are just as uneasy. So that part of me wishes I had never seen one. So you say you want to see one of these creatures. I'd approach it like you were hunting, say, elk or deer. The one thing they need is water and a decent amount of clean water. It doesn't need to be clean as in clear, but not stagnant. Next would be cover, like thick trees in a deep, steep canyon or rocky ledge or cave. They will have to feel absolutely safe and have multiple escape routes. Within that, there needs to be a good food source. Animals like moose, elk, deer, bear can grow to very big. So, if there are enough food sources to allow these animals to get big, there are plenty of food sources to choose from to meet their needs. Once you narrow that down, get on Google Earth. Let the satellite do the walking so you're not wasting time in less than ideal areas. Once you have narrowed that in, then go looking for evidence, boots on the ground. Be prepared to walk in far enough where there are no roads or trails aside from animal tracks. They are flesh and blood mammals that leave behind evidence like footprints, ground nests, etc. I think much by like gorillas. I've studied gorillas as much or more than these things because when I listen to encounters, there seems to be some, not all, but some similarities. Tree structures, I believe they use trees to communicate, just like elk, deer, moose, and bear, mountain lions also, who use them in several ways, from rubbing scent glands, raking their antlers, rubs and scrapes. I think saying every tree that has an X or a tree break is done by them is looking for the wrong evidence. Do they do those things? Most likely, just not every single one. I think once you start to find evidence, let them come and find you. I believe they are as curious about us as we them. Be just inside a tree line at sunset, stay there in the dark, moonless, or just a small moonlight. I'd say you want them to feel like you can't see them. It's their defense mechanism. Stay out of sight. If it's dark, they will most likely feel more confident and get closer. I think before you see the slightest hint of daybreak, they will have already slipped into their daybeds with sentinels. Almost like monkeys and great apes have sentinels. I think these creatures do as well. Mind you, this is just my theory. I don't know for sure on any of these things, and like I said, I do know they are flesh and blood. They don't teleport or go invisible. They have a huge home range and live in small groups. They seem to move at low light or dark of night, making it damn near impossible to see one. All of those things have to line up perfectly with you. It took me 48 years. I spend on average 100 plus days in a year in the mountains. It took decades for everything to line up to allow this to happen, and we were not even looking for one. I wish everyone could have an encounter like we did. Aside from one rock softball-sized thrown and hitting a tree next to our tent, it was all peaceful, relatively close and long enough with no obstruction so we knew exactly what we were looking at. Incidentally, I have that rock in my office. It's cool to think one touched this very rock. Wow. That was, I really enjoyed that. Those are the encounters that, and the people telling that encounter are the ones that really kind of solidify it for me. Where they see one of these creatures and they accept it for what it may or may not be, and this person believes they are flesh and blood, a majestic animal hunting its forests. I could never imagine can you imagine the excitement he and his daughter had when they saw the first male, the large alpha male, and then saw the female with an infant Sasquatch? My God. It truly, truly amazes me how we can go our entire lives. I've only seen one creature thing, and I've been alive for 46 years, and since that day I have been looking day in and day out. We may never get the chance to. That's how elusive they are. That's how magical they are. And yes, they are dangerous, but so isn't a grizzly bear or a mountain lion. Or if you go in a different country, a hyena or a real lion, a pride of lion. But when we see them in nature, what do we think? They are majestic. They are wild, beautiful. That's what I think these creatures are, all of them. It's strange and scary, yes, but still majestic and beautiful. What a really great experience. I'm so happy I was able to share that with you guys. Today's second experience. I work in forestry, and I had a bear that was clearly not afraid of me and did not want to leave me alone. I pulled into our campsite at around 1 a.m. with a truck and trailer. And it's just me out there. I got out and set up the 2 generators, one for the trailer so I didn't freeze to death, and one to keep the equipment we use warm so we can actually use it in the morning. And the batteries didn't die. I also got there late because I was having truck issues that I had no idea what the cause was. It just kept dying, and then it'd be fine, repeating over and over. I set up the generator for the trailer, and as I was getting the second out of the truck, I heard a branch snap loudly. I stop and listen, and I can hear more branches snapping and some rustling in the trees about 50 meters away into the trees. It's getting closer. I thought it was a person at first, so I yelled, "Who's there?" I got no reply. The noises come right up to the edge of the clearing I'm in, a circle, maybe 40 meters across, then stop, and I know whoever it is sitting there watching me. After 15 seconds of me listening hard, half in the truck, I see 2 eyes appear, and then they rise about 6 feet into the air. I could tell it was a bear by the way it moved, which was a relief because, for one, it wasn't a Dogman or a Sasquatch, and 2, because I knew there were only black bears around here, no grizzlies, but I didn't have anything to really defend myself, no bear spray or a gun or bear bangers. So I yelled at the bear, nothing. I hopped in the truck and pulled on the air horn. It didn't even move. I slowly walked over to the trailer, which was still hooked up to the truck, and grabbed a pot and pan and started smashing them together, all the while yelling. And it still didn't move at all, just stood there staring at me. It wasn't making any noises either, no huffing or pawing at the ground, like I knew bears to do when they were upset. But that didn't exactly put my mind at ease, considering this thing was clearly not afraid of me. Eventually, after about 15 minutes of making loud noises and doing nothing but staring at me, it finally dropped to the ground, turned, and started walking away. I waited for about 5 minutes since I had to set up the second generator, which I had to bring closer to the bear picture, a triangle. I was at a corner, the bear was at another, and where I needed to bring the generator was at the third. Right as I pulled the generator out of the truck, I heard branches snapping again, and it came back. It came back to the edge of the clearing and did the exact same thing, stood there staring at me, and wouldn't leave with all the noise I made. And again, after another 15 minutes of it sitting there motionless, it left. I quietly dragged the generator out, started it, ran back to the other generator, started that one, got in my trailer, shut the door, and watched out the window for a while at where this thing kept coming back. It never showed up again. Maybe it did after I went to bed, but there was no sign of it in the morning. So yeah, that's my bear, in quotations, that wouldn't F off experience. Not exactly the most insane thing that's ever happened to someone, but it was intensely disturbing knowing that this thing could have easily killed me, wasn't scared of me, didn't want to leave, remained perfectly still staring at me for such a long time, and that I couldn't do a thing about it because I had half set up the trailer already and could not leave quickly. And even if I could, there was no guarantee my truck was going to start. And I still had a job to do that required me leaving the safety of the truck and go closer to where the bear, in a way that would mean if it decided I was worth the trouble, it could get to me faster than I could get back to my truck. Also, I had a bear charge my truck down at top speed up north, then decided halfway to me that I was a lot bigger than it was and it wasn't worth it. Everybody knows how fast bears are, but there's a difference between reading the number 50 kilometers or even seeing a video and seeing it in person. An animal that big has no business moving that quickly. It's so unnatural. Also heard plenty of very odd noises that night, and the feeling of being watched is nearly constant. I stay overnight in the middle of nowhere alone on a regular basis for my job, and it's very easy to psych yourself out late at night, alone, with no way to contact anyone except unreliable GPS text messaging and hours from anything resembling civilization. I've been doing this for years, and I'm still not used to it. Today's third experience. I was off-roading with some buddies back home in eastern New Brunswick on the Bay of Fundy, and this trail we do ends up on some water. And it's a site for an old ammunition depot from World War II. Now, we've been here many times during the day and sometimes at night. You can drive into and through this massive old structure, and up the hill is the admin building for said site from World War II. It's pretty far in the woods. At the very top of that hill are some grave markers from hundreds of years ago. We were told they're old pirate graves. We live on the coast. Not at all something I doubt being real. We were there one night in the big building having a fire, and we all saw and heard something quite large scramble up the side of the building and start running on top of it. Now there's a dozen of us. There's so clearly not just one person seeing something crazy. There's nothing in the woods of eastern Canada that should be able to climb as quickly as what we saw. Black bear maybe, but this thing basically ran up the side of this 4-storied structure and then ran across the top in moments. We got into our trucks and hightailed it out of there. On another occasion, we were exploring the admin building, which is 3 stories, concrete, had been abandoned since World War II. We go all the way to the top, nothing weird. Coming back, an entire room on the 2nd story is filled with lit candles. but no one around whatsoever. Again, we ran the F out of there. Now, this one, I will admit, was probably an elaborate prank since lots of people would go there and mess around, since it was a fun off-roading trail with some history at the end of it. But the animal climbing we saw still, to this day, mystifies me. Today's fourth terrifying experience. I live in northeastern America, in a pretty rural place with lots of hills, not too many neighbors, and a lot of forest. Well, I had headed out with my mom down our backyard, which is large and relatively clear for about 100 feet, then switches to woods. We got about 30 feet before the woods, and I caught sight of some eyes reflecting in my headlamp. They were a good 50 to 100 feet away, and I assumed they were just deer, but a few things convinced me that they might not be. Around where I live, deer will run away if you make enough noise. And we were talking pretty loudly, but the eyes were not moving. They kept staring directly at us, which is incredibly unlike the deer for this area. On top of that, the pair of eyes on the right were very low to the ground and very wide, too far apart to be a deer considering the distance. We stood for a moment remarking on them, and neither pair looked away. So, since we were spooked, we headed back to the house. Got my brother a machete, a bat, and a metal pole. I know, a little overkill, but our area has lots of scary stuff lately, and headed back down. I expected the eyes to be gone by that point, but nope. They were still there, in a slightly different spot than they had been, but not much further from where they were previously. They stared just as steadily as they had before, so we retreated back inside. Logical answer, deer, but the lack of running away, intent staring, and wide-set eyes feel like that option's ruled out. Another thought is wild dogs, but we don't usually have those in our area, and, once again, wide-set eyes. Possibly a black bear, but they are notoriously scared of people, especially up here. Also, there was no visible signs of anything as far as I could tell. I looked for marks on trees from climbing and saw none. There's a good amount of greenery covering the ground, so it's difficult to look for scat. There was also no signs of any animal lying on the ground. And tonight's second half's final terrifying experience. So a long while ago, myself and my very close friend got bored and decided to discover the nearby woods. We lived in a secluded area where we had thick forest around us for miles, and frankly, the rural area was boring. We had no one our age and no internet, so while we were sitting aimlessly, we decided to pack some stuff and wander into the woods. Now, my friend is a huge guy mainly because he's obsessed with bodybuilding, so it was a bit hard for someone to scare him. But as we walked in, we both had an eerie feeling that we were being watched. The mood was tense, and strangely, the woods were dead silent. No birds chirping, no wind, and no sound of animal or insect. Not even crickets. Approximately 20 minutes of nothing but scaring ourselves, we heard a bark. Where I live, we have stray dogs, both in the streets and the wooded areas, and the ones that are in the wooded areas are not as friendly as the ones in the streets because, well, they're mainly hungry. We stopped in our tracks and paid close attention to where the sound had come from. It was coming from our left and sounded pretty close. However, as the bark kept on, we both realized there was something off about it. I don't know how to put this, but it was almost like someone was trying to impersonate a dog, doing a very good job of it, but at the time, not really. Then we realized another odd thing about our supposed canine friend. The bark was repetitive, like it was playing on a speaker on repeat. My friend said that something is off, and he was genuinely creeped out. And I'm not going to lie, I was shaking. You might say it's quite natural to get creeped out in the woods in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, but this was different. Every single fiber on our bodies wanted us to get the F out of there, but we were too scared to move. Finally, I told my friend to run, and quite reluctantly he obliged. We ran like our lives were depending on it, and still felt like that thing was chasing us. We were out of breath when we found our way back, and my buddy said he heard branches breaking as we were hauling out of there, and he was on the verge of crying hysterically out of pure fear. Strangest thing, however, is the fact that we both live in a country which has nothing to do with America, let alone Native American culture. What do you all think might be stalking and chasing us back there? All right, folks, I am going to actually throw in a couple of extra bonus subscriber experiences just to end this night ending bonus off right. Let's get into them. This experience happened in the Sierra Nevada mountains on the border of California and Nevada. Just to give a little background on myself, I am a very successful technician in the world of broadcast. My eyes are my greatest tool for accuracy and detail. I'm an accomplished visual artist and have studied the movement of animals closely since I was very young. I also have been coming to the same camping area for over 40 years, so scouting fish and other wildlife in the wilderness is second nature to me. That is to say, I have an exceptional eyesight, and I feel I am a better witness to an event than most others, not only because of my keen eyesight, but I also have the ability to keep calm under extraordinary situations. Having said that, in this instance, I have a fellow eyewitness, my wife of 13 years, that is the most skeptical of people that I know. So all of you naysayers save it because I live with the biggest, and she would have never believed my story if she wasn't there in the passenger seat beside me that night. I don't know how to categorize the creature I saw that night. What I saw was very humanoid, and that is so disturbing. The location is Bridgeport, California Twin Lakes Resort, a remote fishing lodge high in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. The resort sits in a valley at about 7,000 feet and in the shadow of the mighty Sawtooth Ridge, a beautiful, secluded spot with no cell service and tons of wildlife. I myself have seen bald golden eagle, osprey, mountain goat, mountain lion, mountain beaver, even the rare Sierra moose. The date would have been just after Labor Day of 2014, maybe September 10th, approximately 5:30 in the morning. We had just finished loading the fishing gear, and we were heading to the creek for some daybreak fishing. The creek campground is about a quarter of a mile from the lake cabin. I've taken this short trip literally 100 times before, and is always active with nocturnal wildlife. So we are always on high alert for the regulars like mule deer, black bear, jackrabbit, and even rattlesnakes on occasion. This morning was a little foggy, still a little dark. The high mountain ridges keep the valley dark from dusk till dawn. I had just passed a small trailer campground as we saw something closing the road coming in our direction. Maybe less than 50 yards away. It looked very light, close to the ground. It was the size of a large goat, but moving very oddly. I thought goat because quickly I remembered that there were sheep herders on this side of the mountain. But I haven't seen any of them for maybe 30 years. I take pride in being the first to see and identify wildlife, but this time I needed a second to figure out exactly what I was seeing. So I asked my wife in the front passenger seat, "What is that?" pointing to the thing running in our direction, that the likes of which I know I had never seen before, and I was mostly confused because its limbs weren't bending or moving in the right way that a deer, bear, rabbit, cat are supposed to move. So my mind did an evaluation and spit out the answer. It's an escaped sheep or goat that had been sheared and is running for its life, so scared it didn't realize all its knees were broken and bent backwards. and not running on its hooves, feet at all. My wife could only say slowly because of disbelief, "What the hell?" Now, when my lights came across the creature, it was crossing the street, and we got the feeling we were totally surprised it. And as I turned on my high beams, as I am always ready to do with large animals on the road, it seemed to get very irritated as it turned its long human neck towards us, and almost shook its head as it gave us a glare, and started double timing along the road now in our direction. We're getting closer, but instead of being able to more positively ID this thing, I was only more confused, mostly because this thing's legs weren't broken at all. It was running on them like that, long, lean limbs, but it was crawling, creeping impossibly low to the ground, its torso no more than 5 inches from the ground, yet it was moving at a strangely incredible pace. I wondered first, with such long limbs, why is it so low, and not running on the bottom of its hooves or paws? Could it run so fast? How? The order of its feet landing was completely wrong as well, and if it was really trying to retreat quickly, it was not bounding or bouncing or swaying side to side. Its limbs moved in unison, like a crab or a spider. To be the most accurate, but without jumping to any conclusions, I would describe it as one of Giger alien creature. As fake-looking as it might be, there was no movement in its torso. Only the legs and arms propelled it quickly along. It appeared to me to be a puppet, maybe, moved by a marionette. Very bizarre. Maybe because I was so puzzled and troubled that I could not classify this animal, it kept me from flipping out. When we got close enough to see the facial features, I should describe the features that I saw clearly and up close. As mentioned, human-like torso, about 4 feet long, no tail. Human-like haunches. As we passed it, I saw it was not shaved at all. It was hairless and had pale skin. Its limbs were long, thin, very defined muscles, and sinewy. Although it was crawling close to the ground, it had large, very human ape-like shoulders. I've only seen such shoulders on upright walking animals. It seemed to be running on its front knuckles or claws. Imagine a sloth, but foot-long fingers or claws. The neck was thin and long, holding a forward-gazing predator, not prey-type head. The skull had features close to human and ape than any canine, cat, rodent. The skull seemed to have heavy protruding eye ridge with a flat curve leading to the nasal opening that you could hardly see. This I remember looking for so that I could at least classify which animal family it came from. A goat snout or a cat or canine nose, nothing. Just 2 small openings, high up by the eyes. Then even stranger, the mouth. There was no long snout. This was a tight-lipped human mouth with a large chin that almost seemed to grin, but somehow I knew that it was not a friendly grin. Almost evil, but how would an animal have an evil grin, right? If that wasn't enough to freak us out, then came the eyes. So at first sight, my headlights lit this weird thing up, and as with all nocturnal animals, the first noticeable thing is always the reflection of the eyes in the car light. Like all the rest of the many animals I've seen on this tiny stretch of road, their cover is blown instantly. Well, not this case. And of all the troubling things that I had observed, this was probably the most unexplainable. I was driving right into it, and I could see the eyebrow ridge. I saw deep eye sockets, but no shiny large or tiny eyes. Just the sockets. All will be revealed shortly, right? As I was sure to peer deep into whatever animal it was eyes as we came within 15 feet of it. Well,
when the moment of truth came, and my wife and I were horrified when all we saw were deep red eye sockets, like the thing had no eyes, or there was red membrane over them, something like a blind cave creature. Well, I was about to drive off the road and tried to track the thing, but something told me I was better off just watching it run in the cloud of dust. The friggin' thing turned its head to look at us, was grinning, all with its red eye sockets, and it just zips away, never breaking its creepy crawl. So that's my sighting. I've never heard or saw this thing again, and I have no idea what it was. Nothing adds up. I really feel I was not supposed to see this thing. People like to say maybe it was an experiment gone wrong, or a mutated, deformed animal, but what I have to say to that is, this thing was not sick or dying. It was strong, aware, fast, and would kick the ass of whatever would mess with it. So if this were a real cryptid, someone else must have seen it. Hell, it was by campsites. What would it be doing so close to humans if it depended on seclusion for survival? Nothing adds up. Was it some kind of interdimensional creature that I just got lucky and saw as it slipped in and then out back to its home? This thing really looked like a monster. I believe it would be called a demon by most other people if they saw it because it was so strange looking. Sometimes I think it was something like a ghost, maybe from a different time, but the thing is, I saw it kick up dust as it ran into the brush, so it was real, not a vision. So there you have it. 2 people within 15 to 20 feet with a car light fixed on the subject for 10 to 20 seconds. No drugs or alcohol involved, no ghost stories or witchcraft talk. Just, oh my God, let's go fishing, then oh shit, what's that? Today's third part of the upload. Somewhere around 8 years ago, 2 of us were driving in a neighborhood on the edge of town. It was that time of year when things got dark early. I don't recall the exact time, but it was night. The sun had been down for a while. There was a little bit of traffic still and stoplights, so it was moving slow. I was in the passenger seat, and I spotted a pale shape darting around in and out of a cul-de-sac and on the sidewalks. I said something like, "What the hell is that?" And the driver of the car saw it as well when they had to stop for a light. We reasoned it must have been a loose dog, but that was not the first impression either of us got. I'm open-minded to strange claims. My friend is generally not. The fact that they said they could not tell if it was a dog either stuck with me. While I can entertain the notion of Sasquatch or something, this person is very much a believer in mainstream, common consensus, reality models. The creature, very pale, almost luminescent. I couldn't make out any fur, but it was night. The thing was fast, and I didn't get a clear enough look. The size and shape was similar to a huge dog, somewhere in the area of 150 pounds, I guess. Kind of emaciated looking, lean, long body with not too much belly and weird long limbs. I don't recall seeing a tail. It was moving on all fours, constantly, rapidly darting in and out of the shadows created by the streetlights. It was a quadruped, but didn't move like I expect the dog would. Big loping strides and odd movements. For a moment I speculated it was a female deer because of the bounding on the long legs, but deer have beer barrel torsos and long ears. I would not expect a starving stray to have the energy to be moving that quickly, but it could have been in a panic. A few times it slowed down enough as we were moving forward to get a better look. It was hard to make out the details on the head in the gloom, but something seemed really wrong about it. Not like a dog's head, but more like a tilted flat face with a tapered chin. I realized that's a similar profile to a dog's snout. I don't think it had ears. Very bright, glowing eyes, brighter than I'd ever seen on an animal. Those things were staring, white eyes, forward-facing and large. I could see videos and pictures of animals with eyes that glow that bright, but videos are not the same as our eyes. They perceive light differently than equipment will capture. I don't remember seeing eyes glow nearly that bright on a dog before either. And usually dogs look like dogs from the front. Where we were, it's the suburbs of western Washington state. There's a small creek, a strip of woods behind the cul-de-sac, and multiple trails throughout the neighborhood. There's a large cemetery about a mile away, multiple large parks, wilderness areas within walking distance. Connected lakes and streams, usual sewer systems, I assume, but further out are very large natural areas and forested mountains, well within roaming range for an animal that size. I felt like this might have been some sort of omen. I can't say if that was related to anything negative that happened in my life. I felt a little haunted emotionally, creeped out. I thought about that dog-like creature with a human face as something I could use in my world building and monster design. I know this is an old memory, and I could not really get a clear look, but this experience was so unsettling and unusual that it stayed with me, coming across sketches and even a possible fake photo that were very close to my memory prompted me to share this. I get things wrong from time to time, but I do not fabricate. Now, this could have been an emaciated, white, stray dog with unusual glowing eyes and bizarre movements that was huge. I'll freely admit it. It's weird that, based on seeing it, I would add a dog-like monster with a human-like face to my menagerie. It's weird that someone with a mainstream worldview agreed that something was off and we were both creeped out. Normally, I'm not asking, what was that thing years later? Considering how many mainstream lies I've uncovered and other strange experiences I've had personally, I'm inclined to believe my senses more than what I am told by authorities at this point. How the world works is not a fixed dogma. That night my senses, my instincts said that is not a dog. That thing is wrong and dangerous. Make of this what you will. I swear these details are true to the best of my recollection. Today's fourth part of the upload. I'd like to share two experiences. One, my own, and one that happened to some relatives. First, my uncle's experience, because I think that one is more interesting. I wasn't there to experience it firsthand, but they swear up and down that it was true. My uncles, both twins, were doing door-to-door candy bar fundraising for their school in rural Michigan in the early 80s. It's getting to be dusk, and they decided they would wrap up selling with one more house, then go home. The last house is this house that sits on a dirt road intersection, sort of on the top of a capital T-shaped intersection, so that the front of the house faces the bottom of the T. Facing from the house down the road, that makes up the vertical part of the T. There's a wooded lot on the right side of the road and a field on the left of the road. I hope it's clear. I can draw a map if it's not. Anyway, they finish up making their pitch to this house, walk down the driveway, and as they get close to the road, there's this thing that comes out of the woods. My uncle said that the closest description he could give was that it looked like a puma. At this point, they're sort of scared, like anyone else would be if they spotted a puma as a kid, but nothing seems out of the ordinary about this creature itself. It gets about halfway across the road, the vertical part of the T, stops and looks at them, and then stands up on its hind legs, sprints across the remainder of the road, leaps over the embankment on the far side of the road, and runs across the field into the woods in the distance. After it stood up, it remained on two legs until it disappeared into the tree line. They, understandably freaked out, run back to the house, asked to use the phone, and have their parents come and pick them up because they were way too scared to walk home. My experience is something certainly abnormal. It occurred in north central North Carolina. If anyone cares, I used to work a second shift at Walmart, meaning I got out of work at 1 in the morning. I was driving home, and there's a portion of the drive where it's not uncommon to see deer at night. That section is a bridge where there is a lake to the left, a splitway that goes under the bridge, and a big swampy wooded area to the right. I get to this area and I see what I think is a group of deer crossing the road, barely illuminated by my headlights, so I slow down like anyone else. As I get closer, I realize that there's at least 6 of these things, which would be a lot of deer. And they're not running like deer at all, even though they were running at least as quickly as a deer does. Deer run with a sort of up and down bounding motion. These things were running like dogs do when they move a quick-paced walk, alternating legs diagonal from each other. But again, they were moving quickly. Right as the last one crossed, and I was close enough for them to be pretty thoroughly lit up by my headlights, one of the last ones turned its head and looked at me while it was running, and I got a good look at its face, and it was a canine. But the whole group was at least as big as an average deer in the area. Now, unless there's a pack of Great Dane running around rural North Carolina, I have no explanation of what I saw. Today's final encounter. I lived on a dairy farm, and across a couple of the hills were 2 boys who were 6 years apart, the same age as my sons. At the time, they were 7 and 13. The boys had a single mom and a dad who lived in Alaska. I would have them come and spend the weekend with my boys to give their mom a break. She worked real hard, and my boys enjoyed the company. The older 2 would go to the barn at night and help milk, while the other 2 played outside until dark. It was in the summer, and they were out of school. One of the younger 2 came in the house screaming and was terrified. When I finally was able to get my son to make sense, I learned that something huge had jumped out of the rye field, and it had the smaller one with it. My son was a gifted artist even then, and I had him draw it. The thing was about 8 feet tall, covered in gray fur, and had green glowing eyes. He hadn't paid much attention to the little one except for telling me that it had fallen down after it jumped. I had to sit with them until they fell asleep that night. The older boys came down with my husband after milking, and they hadn't seen anything unusual. The reason I believed both the younger boys was because they were both very serious. They've never given me a minute's trouble. In the morning, I went to have a look outside and see if there were any footprints. There was a huge thistle growing where the boys said the thing had jumped out of. My jaw dropped to see it completely flattened. This thistle had easily been 6 feet tall. I went back to the house just shaking my head. I didn't know what to think. After that, I would go and pick the brothers up in the car rather than have them cross the fields to get to the house. I knew the kids had seen something, but I didn't know what it was. I just felt very uneasy. Next weekend, I'll be damned if the same thing doesn't happen again. The older boys were at the barn, and the kids came running screaming. This time, my younger son told me that he wanted to eat them. I kept vigil again, peering through the blinds in their bedroom until they had fallen asleep. I simply don't know what to do but get on my knees and beg for God to move. I really don't care what I had to go through, but these were my children. Now, you can believe this or not, I don't really care. But we sold the farm within the month and moved to a different town. Prior to that, there were no more sleepovers because I was responsible for those kids, and I simply didn't want any harm to come to them. I kept my youngest very close to my side until we did move.
Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this night-ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives folks like us a chance and a place to share our experiences and theories judgment-free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.